Hello, and thank you for joining us for the first episode of the eClinicalWorks podcast. Every few weeks, we'll educate and assist you in learning about both eClinicalWorks and the healthcare industry as a whole. Each episode will feature either an eCW professional who has extensive knowledge in the product or a customer who's mastered the topic being discussed. Our hope is that after watching each of the podcasts, you'll come away with a far greater understanding of the product or the industry. We hope that you enjoy our first podcast and return for many more. Today's topic is meaningful use, some of the changes that are coming up in 2014, some of the things that maybe we have missed in 2013, and I'm speaking with Elizabeth Schreiner, who is a member of our Meaningful Use team. Liz has been on the Meaningful Use team for the last 3 years, and you probably have seen her if you've been to any of the user conferences in that time. She's helped over 1,000 practices to attest for meaningful use, done another 1,000 trainings or so for the meaningful use remediation training, and she's worked with practices in sizes from a single doctor to several hundred doctors. Liz, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me today, Adam.
Absolutely, my pleasure. So, Liz, you've worked with many organizations to help them through meaningful use. What would you say is the prevailing reaction to the program?
I think the first reaction I get most commonly going to sites is you'll hear a lot of times they call it meaningless use. It's kind of one of the running jokes for a lot of providers.
And do you think that's a fair assessment?
I don't personally think it's a fair assessment. I think where that stems from is a fear of change. It's kind of in the beginning of the program where they're a little worried that they're going electronic for the first time. So it comes from a place of fear. And so as the program evolves and they get more into it, and as they see the positives it brings, it turns into, okay, this really is meaningful. It really is helping my patients.
And meaningful use is, of course, an incentive program, right? An incentive program in this case means that there's money involved, up to...
It depends on which program you're participating in. A meaningful use for Medicare is a max of $44,000. And if you're participating in Medicaid meaningful use through your state, it's a max of about $63,000 and change.
Oh, wow. Quite a bit.
So there's a lot on the table. Of course, with Medicare, the later you start, it kind of tapers down in your payments. So there's no time like the present. You got to get out there. You got to make sure you're doing this program so you can get that money that's available to you.
Wonderful. And of course, there are other benefits as well. I mean, when we talk about incentives, there's probably more to that than just money.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about the patient population. They're looking to make sure that this program in place is improving health outcomes. That's kind of the whole goal of the program. If you've maybe noticed, the program is kind of segmented into different stages. So stage 1 is all about going electronic, making sure all your paper records are getting put electronically. So all your patient information is in your computer, kind of trackable, reportable. Stage 2 is all about interoperability. Having different EMRs talk to each other, having different technologies kind of helping you rather than being afraid of it. And stage 3 is all about really those improved health outcomes. They want to make sure, first and foremost, what they're doing is actually improving patient care in the workplace, and you're not losing them in the hustle bustle of day-to-day activities.
So providers who choose not to participate in meaningful use are not only leaving money on the table, but they're also potentially delaying improvements to the ways in which care is actually delivered.
That's a great way to look at it. If you're not participating, not going electronic, you are missing out on incentives yourself, but you also could be, hindering your patient care. If you look at it that way, you're not able to catch everything if you're just having a paper chart where, it's stored in a shelf as opposed to right in front of you on your EMR.
So would it be fair to say that meaningful use hasn't really fully arrived yet? I mean, this is a process that's being put into place over time.
Yeah, I mean, me personally, living it day to day, I feel it's arrived. I mean, it's hard for me to not feel that way. When people are starting stage 2, so almost in the middle of the program, you can look at it that way. But there's still a handful of, or maybe more than a handful of providers that have yet to start. So for them, it hasn't arrived. But for all of us, kind of living it day to day, it's here. It's here, and it's here to stay. It's
here to stay, right? Exactly. So now it would be nice, of course, if this program were all carrots, right? There are some sticks, though, correct?
Correct.
Tell us about those.
So there's penalties involved with the program, and that's really coming in if you're participating in the Medicare Meaningful Use program. So depending on when you started with the program, so there's different stages. If you were an early adopter and started participating in 2011 or 2012 with Meaningful Use, you must report to a full year successfully in 2013 reporting. And if you don't, you get penalized. You know, it's kind of a scary thing for providers out there right now, especially since we're in the middle of attestations for 2013. If they missed out on the full year, that means in 2015, there will be a 1% penalty on the Medicare reimbursement. So there's that stick you were talking about. It's kind of what's pushing them to really get it tested.
Of course, and that's coming at a time, you know, when providers are already feeling a bit of a squeeze financially. So to have that extra hindrance on top of that can make it even worse. So, in other words, essentially, what you're saying is that providers who've begun the process will be eligible for incentive payments going forward, and those who put it off until next year, perhaps, will not be eligible for any payments at all.
Yes, you can still start, and that's one of the biggest ideas and things we want to put out there is that it's not too late. You can still start with Meaningful Use and get some of those incentive dollars. It's not going to be as much, so if you're doing Medicare specifically, the max for starting in 2014, your max incentive is $24,000. I mean, that's still...
But it's still something. It's
yes,
still a sizable
it's not
amount
nothing.
of money.
So you have to start this year. And also, it's important to remember that if you start for the first time in 2014, your first time reporting, that you must be successfully attested by October 1st in order to not get penalized. Those sticks you were talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
So you still have a chance to get the money, but you need to do it in a timely fashion, essentially, to make sure that you get the payment and you don't get penalized.
So what about those people who are trying to submit still for 2013, right? Isn't there a deadline for that coming up?
Yep.
It's close.
Yeah, so typically it's February 28th each year is the deadline for Medicare attestations for the calendar year prior. So, and thankfully CMS, they actually extended it. They had so many practices who were attesting and so eager to participate in Meaningful Use, they extended the Medicare deadline to March 31st, 2014. This is for your 2013 reporting.
Okay, so the deadline to submit for 2013 Medicare Meaningful Use data has received a little bit of an extension,
yep.
Okay, to March 31st.
Yep, and I'd like to point out for the Medicaid practices too, always check with your state. Whenever you hear there's a Medicare change, always check with your state to make sure they're following those same changes.
So be vigilant if you're on Medicare, because that is a program that differs from state to state. Mm-hmm. And then Medicare, of course, is a federal program, so that's at the
exactly.
At the government level.
The whole gist, the whole idea of the program is the same. Medicare, Medicaid, the measures themselves are the same. It's kind of those things like a deadline. They might have different deadlines depending on the state.
Wonderful. So we do have that extension for Meaningful Use 2013 for Medicare and possibly for Medicaid. But we really can't consider that much of a break, right? I mean, we have to kind of start right away to refocus on Meaningful Use this year, and there's some changes coming in 2014.
Yeah, the biggest changes are that people need to be on what's called 2014 certified software. So that's the biggest change. People are used to their 2013 and previous certified software. So all us EMRs, EHRs out there had to get recertified to have 2014 certified software. And this is regardless of stage 1 or stage 2, it applies to both. And that's going to be our eClinicalWorks version 10. So all practices must be on version 10 before the start of their reporting period. And that's the big change I think you're referring to, is that you need to make sure you're prepared and you're upgrading and getting used to this new software and the new changes involved with it.
Okay, well, it sounds like I need to be on version 10
yes, you
for
do
2014,
need to be on version 10.
No matter what.
Mm-hmm.
All right, excellent.
Yep.
All right, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to keep talking about how to figure out where you are in Meaningful Use and what to do going forward.
The clock is ticking. Have you attested for Meaningful Use yet? CMS has extended the Meaningful Use Stage 1 deadline for Medicare to March 31st, 2014. It's not too late to join the thousands of eClinicalWorks customers that have already successfully attested for meaningful use. As of August 2013, over 18,800 plus eCW eligible providers have successfully attested for meaningful use, making eClinicalWorks number 2 for the total Medicare meaningful use attestations. Not on eClinicalWorks? Make the switch to eClinicalWorks V10 today. eClinicalWorks V10 is the most advanced EHR on your PC, phone, and iPad. Visit www.eclinicalworks.com/make-the-switch for more information.
All right, everybody, welcome back to this episode of the eClinicalWorks podcast, where we're talking with Elizabeth Schreiner, meaningful use specialist extraordinaire, about meaningful use today and in the future. So Liz, I've heard that there is some confusion out there about the reporting period for 2014.
Correct. That's one of the things we want to put out there as well, to educate the providers that regardless of what stage you're in, stage 1, stage 2, regardless of how many years you've been participating in the program, it is a 3-month reporting period. A lot of providers are thinking it's a full year. It's actually a 3-month reporting period regardless of stage. And it's special because it's confined to one of the 4 quarters. It's not rolling like it used to be. So that 3-month period has to be one of the 4 quarters. And as we discussed before the break, that you need to be on version 10 for that entire reporting period.
Okay, so even one day on version 9 in that reporting period is going to make me
Correct.
have to wait
Yep.
another couple months. Okay, so and by quarters you mean January through March, April through June, whatever. We all know our months.
Yeah, there's one difference in that, and that's if you're starting for the first time this year, your very first year meaningful user, that you can actually still do any consecutive 90 days, that rolling 90-day period. You still need to be on version 10 for that 90-day period. And as we talked about earlier, you need to avoid that penalty. So you really should start and be upgraded before July 1st. So you'd have time to get it tested by that October 1st deadline to avoid the penalty.
Okay, and eClinicalWorks, of course, is managing those queues, and we're making sure that everybody's going to get upgraded before that deadline. Whether you're first in line or maybe a little bit later down the line. So, Liz, let's say that a provider has started down the path for meaningful use. And how would he know what stage he is in during any given year? I mean, would he start at, let's say he starts today, would he start at stage 2 and then have to do a lot to catch up?
So whenever you start, you always start in stage 1. And you always do at least 2 years in each stage. So if you started last year in 2013, you started in stage 1, and you're probably hearing everyone talk about stage 2, so you're probably thinking, okay, I'm on stage 2, 2014. Nope, you always do 2 years in each stage. And we like to direct our providers to all the useful documentation out there. The CMS EHR Incentive Program website has this awesome timeline tool where you plug in what program you're participating in, what year you started, and it gives you this timeline of exactly what you're doing each year of participation, what stage you're in, reporting period, and even the incentive you can potentially receive for that exact year.
So CMS has a lot of information on their website.
Oh, yeah.
eClinicalWorks, of course, also has information on their website as well, resources there. Tell us about some of those.
So we have a wealth of knowledge. So most of the documentation is going to be on the support portal, your my.eclinicalworks.com website. You log in. There is a knowledge section. You go in, and there's a whole meaningful use area, and there is just stage 1 documentation, stage 2 documentation, CQMs, MAC dashboards, you name it, we have documentation on it for meaningful use on that website.
And I think there's even a PowerPoint slide presentation about the changes from meaningful use stage 1 to stage 2 as well, so people were looking for that. All right, so once I figured out what stage I'm in, all right, I look at the program measures. So I can see that there could be a benefit in coming up with some sort of strategy to accomplishing all this. I mean, how would an office prioritize that to be successful?
If you're just starting and you're not as familiar with the program, or maybe you're starting late in the game and you want to make sure everything is, copacetic, we recommend you want to make sure those time-sensitive measures are the ones you're kind of tackling first, because there's certain functionalities you want to make sure you have enabled, like drug formulary checks. those need to be enabled right in the specs it tells you for the entire reporting period. So that's not something you could turn on halfway through and be compliant on. So you want to make sure those measures that are time sensitive are turned on and you're ready to go at the beginning. So you kind of want to tackle those first. Because a lot of the other measures you could fix along the way, if you will.
Great. What about differences between priorities in stage 1 and priorities in stage 2?
The biggest priority, in my opinion, right now, currently, for stage 1 versus stage 2, is probably portal. I mean, that's not even different for stages. There was a big change that was released for stage 1 specifically that might not be well known for providers, that they removed one of the core measures, the electronic copy of health information. They removed one of the menu measures, the timely electronic access, and they created a brand new measure called patient electronic access. You have to now web enable, or give web access, we call it web enabling, 50% of those patients you see in the reporting period. So that is a huge change for stage 1 that they need to be prepared for. And for my opinion, people using patient portal in stage 2 is also one of the biggest things they need to focus on.
So, of course, patient engagement, getting those patients able to talk to your office electronically and through new means, opening up a lot of doors and very important.
Patient engagement is a focus, for stage 2, that web enabling patient portal, that's huge. They really want patients involved in their healthcare. That's, meaningful use. They want patients knowing what's going on, involved, and on top of making sure they are getting the proper healthcare. And elaborating on a change or what to focus on for stage 2, interoperability, P2P, our provider-to-provider tool. That's going to be another, what they need to work on as well, is getting that enabled, getting your contacts out there, kind of, and promoting use of exchanging information electronically.
So what are some other things that practices sometimes forget to do when they're getting ready to attest?
For me, stage 1 is going to be the stage where you need to make sure things are set up properly moving forward and in a timely fashion. So we already talked about drug formulary checks. There's some other measures out there that are time sensitive that you need to make sure are set up properly as well. That's going to be making sure you have drug interactions. I mean, eClinicalWorks, we have that enabled automatically. But also you have to make sure you have alerts enabled. Those need to be enabled for the entire reporting period. One of the biggest measures we see practices almost forget about is the submitting an immunization test file to your state registry. That's something really huge going forward. It needs to be done each year, and we absolutely can help with that. We have tools like we can generate our own file for submission. We can help create an interface. And then finally, what I see practice get hung up on the most is probably clinical summaries. Another one of these time-sensitive measures that you can't go back and fix. So if these are things you're focusing on day 1 of meaningful use, and you're just aware that they need to be set up or going through, you need to make sure it's part of your workflow, that's really important. And a lot of this is stage 1 prep. Once you already have it enabled, it's going to feed into stage 2. I wouldn't see a reason why you would turn off or change your workflows, that these wouldn't be enabled for impact your compliance. So just starting off on the right foot is huge with this program.
Okay, so we're going to take another break here, and when we come back, we'll talk about some of the scarier parts of meaningful use and what you can do to make them less scary.
Did you know eClinicalWorks has all the information you need to stay on top of what's happening in the industry for meaningful use? Current eClinicalWorks customers can visit my.eClinicalWorks.com for the most up-to-date information on everything you need to successfully attest for meaningful use. And once there, sign up for the MU monthly newsletter and be the first to get all the late-breaking news on what's happening in the world of meaningful use. Not on eClinicalWorks? Make the switch to eClinicalWorks V10 today. eClinicalWorks V10 is the most advanced EHR on your PC, phone, and iPad. Visit www.eClinicalWorks.com/make-the-switch for more information.
And we're back with the final segment of our Meaningful Use podcast. So, Elizabeth, we've been talking about a lot of different changes for meaningful use and a lot of numbers and facts and figures, but meaningful use has introduced a lot of new workflows and concepts to offices that previously did much of their work on paper. So now everything is computerized, or soon will be computerized. Practices have to prepare something called a security risk analysis. What is that? Why is that important?
Correct, the security risk analysis. And actually, this existed before meaningful use, having your policies and procedures, in a document form, kind of listing out everything. So security risk analysis is all about documenting your protocols, what you have in place. It's kind of a gap analysis on your practice. So it's about the EMR, yes, absolutely, but it's also about your workflows outside of the EMR. What do you have in place to make everything safe and secure? So you have a couple resources out there. If you either host your own servers, or we host your servers, our cloud clients, we call them. We can help with some things there. If you're a cloud client, we have documents we can send you, because obviously we host your data. So we're in charge of disaster recovery and what's called the data in transit. So we have documentation which explains everything there, which you would keep with your security risk analysis. It's part of it. Because you're also in charge of your data at rest. So that's going to be everything like your laptop. You're in charge of the security for that. And so we send you those documents, and the ONC, the Office of the National Coordinator, actually released a security risk analysis template. You can use your little Google machine and just look up meaningful use security risk, and you're going to see a wealth of information. We have that on file as well. If you'd like, just reach out to us and we'll send that to you. So we can help with part of it, but there's a lot that the practices need to do on their own. But if it's a little daunting for you, we also have vendors that we suggest which can walk you through the security risk analysis step by step. So there's a lot of different options you have. You just want to make sure it's done and documented. If you're ever audited, it's something that you will have to send the auditors to prove you have it done.
That's great information. And this is something that you do every year, correct? Because you don't just do it once and forget about it.
It's not one and done. It's something, yes, you complete it the very first year, but you're actually identifying any issues, any gaps that you need to fix going forward. So it's a living document. Each year, or even just not more than once a year, whenever you have a change in your practice, you're also changing this document on file to reflect those changes.
Now, you mentioned something a moment ago, and I think a lot of our ears will be pricked up at that. And this is a word that brings fear to a lot of people, and in many circumstances as well as this one. And that word is audit.
Yes.
So tell us about what happens in an audit, and what do we have to be worried about?
Everyone is terrified of that word, audit. With meaningful use, if you didn't lie about your information, you're going to be fine. If you took the information, eClinicalWorks users, if you took the information off our Mac dashboards, our reporting tool, if you really did, then you completed those self-attestation measures, you're going to pass the audit. Our biggest recommendation, though, is to kind of safeguard yourself from that fear, is to document your process throughout the year. So we recommend taking screenshots. So those self-attestation measures we discussed earlier, drug formulary, drug interactions, immunization, the alerts, taking a screenshot of the functionality. CMS actually recommends that you take a screenshot of the beginning of the reporting period of this functionality, the middle, and the end. And this is to prove that you had it enabled. If you forget these screenshots, we can always help pull that data from eClinicalWorks. So hope is not lost. The information's out there. We're here to help. If you really completed meaningful use, you did it, to a T, you dotted those I's, crossed your T's, you're going to be fine with these audits. We also have a audit document on our support portal, which walks you through step by step of what we recommend as well.
Wonderful. And you said multiple times throughout this interview that eClinicalWorks is ready to help. Mm-hmm. Maybe you could talk about some of the services and ways in which eClinicalWorks is there for them.
Yeah, absolutely. We have several services out there. We have, for people that, they really just want to go over the information, they kind of want someone to walk through it. We have our meaningful use consulting service. It's remote. We do it in about 4 hours, but you can actually spread up that time. You don't have to do a chunk of 4 hours. So we actually walk you through step by step. Every measure, we go make sure you understand exactly where it's pulling from, exactly what is the calculation, what you need to make sure it's completed, and we'll also walk you through and complete any setup that might need to be done. And we talk through workflows, what's going to work best for your practice to make sure this gets completed. For practices that like a little more personal, face-to-face, we do meaningful use on-sites. That is an option. And we help with attestations, so that you don't have to worry about as well. And you're going to find we do have a flyer online, actually, which does explain more in depth exactly what each service entails. But the biggest thing I like to put across to the providers is that we are here to help. Don't feel like you have to go at it alone. We're here to help you through it.
Well, it sounds like a pretty comprehensive menu of services and ways in which
Yep, and we like to
help.
tailor them to the providers. If you have a specific workflow you need us to work around, we tailor all our services to make sure that it's going to suit specific providers.
Great. Liz, thank you so much for being here with us today and answering all of our questions.
My pleasure.
Sources of information, if you're looking for more, you've got the CMS website, you've got the eClinicalWorks.com website with plenty of information. You've got your support portal and all of those things. Thank you, everybody, for listening here today. On behalf of eClinicalWorks and the eClinicalWorks podcast, I'm Adam Siladi. Thanks for listening.
This broadcast and its contents are the sole property of eClinicalWorks and are protected by federal law and international treaties. You are strictly prohibited from making a copy of, modification of, or form of rebroadcasting or re-encoding this broadcast without prior written permission from eClinicalWorks Public Relations, except as may be permitted by law. This broadcast is provided for informational purposes only. It is intended as a personal, non-commercial use. Product specifications are subject to change without notice. Please contact eClinicalWorks Public Relations with any questions. eClinicalWorks V10 EHR is ONC HIT 2014 edition certified as a complete EHR. eClinicalWorks V10 CC 2014 955447-1.